This is the full story and lore of Apex Legends in the Titanfall universe. We'll be kicking things off in the year 2131 with the events leading into Titanfall, zoom through Titanfall 1 and Titanfall 2, and then finish things up with Apex Legends in around the year 2730. So yeah, that's like 600 years of content to cover in one video, so hopefully you've got some popcorn and a diaper because we're going to be here for a hot minute. Like in my prior entire history of Apex Legends video, I've put timestamps in the description if you want to learn more about the specific storylines in Titanfall or Apex, but I'll be honest, there are so many connections between Apex Legends and Titanfall that we're just going to plow through the entire story from beginning to end because there are just kind of references everywhere along the timeline. All right, prepare for Titanfall. Our story begins with none other than the man that started it all, Dr. Heinrich Hammond. In 2131, Hammond founded Hammond Engineering, the company that would essentially dictate the future of humanity. Around this time, humanity was still stuck with the same methods of space travel that we have today. We could really only travel around our own solar system, but there was no way we were going to be traveling to the nearest star unless we had some kind of new technology that was developed. Well, with the help of Hammond Engineering and them pioneering new developments in space travel, it didn't take very long until jump drives were created. The new jump drive technology allowed ships to travel very long distances in the blink of an eye. The drives themselves required a specially refined fuel in order to recharge, so after a series of several jumps, there was a real danger of being stranded if there were no refueling stations nearby. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but this created a very critical need for refueling stations along jump routes through space. So, with the new jump drives, humanity was able to expand their space exploration to nearby star systems. Unfortunately, there were very few habitable planets on any of the nearby star systems, but there were some. These regions of space were nicknamed the core systems because, they were the ones closest to Earth. And as we explored the vastness of space and all these new worlds, Hammond Engineering merged with other companies and became something new called the Interstellar Manufacturing Corporation, or IMC for short. Due to the vast size of the IMC megacorporation, they quickly became the dominant force within the core systems. They had some conflicts with foes over the course of several centuries, but due in large part to a new group within the IMC called Hammond Robotics, they won the arms race by being the first to develop, debatably, capable robotic soldiers called Spectres. The IMC also continued expanding their reach among the stars and discovered a new region of space with a ton of habitable planets, which they called the Frontier. Alright, so quick recap. First, we've got the core system of stars and mostly uninhabitable planets closest to Earth, and now we've got this new frontier region, which are much further away, but are also much more habitable. Alright, cool, let's keep going. The initial settlers of the frontier were given money and funding by the IMC to start colonizing the hundreds of habitable planets. Outposts became villages, which turned into towns and ultimately became cities. While the colonizing was going on, the public support from the core systems went down a lot due to internal conflicts, so the IMC kind of backed away from the colonies in the frontier and focused more on the people in the core systems. Without the IMC breathing down their neck anymore, the people living in the colonies on the frontier started to feel a sense of their own freedom. But before long, the IMC was back because they needed to secure resources for the booming population back at home in the core systems. So the people of the frontier began resisting the IMC to protect the freedoms they had been enjoying. The IMC in turn set up military installations all across the frontier to combat the freedom fighter militia that was growing in numbers day by day. During this time, Hammond Robotics had not only developed orbital defense systems and Titans, which I don't think need much explanation, but they had also been working on a confidential project called the Simulacrum Program. The aim of the program was essentially to merge a human's memories, knowledge, and personality into a robot, and by the year 2445, Hammond Robotics succeeded with their first simulacrum named Revenant. Revenant's human name was Caleb Cross, and before he became the killer robot we all know and love, he was a hitman for a mercenary group called the Syndicate. Cross was killed on the planet of Gaia, and his body was rushed to a Hammond Robotics facility for preservation. Hammond Robotics turned Cross into a simulacrum, but also blocked his past memory and added protocols meant to keep his new simulacrum intelligence unaware of his past identity. This worked for over 250 years until he fulfilled a contract to murder Marcos Andrade, Loba's father. During the mission, Revenant suffered some damage that resulted in a failure of his programming, which brought back all of his memories that had been blocked by Hammond Robotics. So, and I know we've jumped way ahead here, but when the Apex games finally came about and Revenant heard that Hammond Robotics still existed during Season 4, he had a thirst for vengeance to kill absolutely everyone connected to Hammond Robotics. Alright, so that's Revenant, but let's zoom back to 15 years before Titanfall 1. Two of the leaders for the IMC, Vice Admiral Graves and Executive Officer McAllen, would simulate war games against each other to try to analyze if there were any main weak points within the IMC. They found a clear weak point to be a refueling depot on the planet of Demeter. Loss of the refueling depot could shut out the IMC from the frontier altogether, so the IMC increased defenses around the planet. Over time, McAllen begins to disagree with his commanding officer Graves on the IMC's treatment of frontier citizens. This leads McAllen to cause a mutiny against Graves aboard the ship the IMS Odyssey. Due to their prior friendship, Graves allows McAllen to take control of the ship, of which he then proceeds to go off the grid and crash lands the thing onto an unexplored planet called Troy. McAllen and his crew then build a small colony town out of the wreckage of the ship. Fast forward around 15 years later, and Titanfall 1 begins with the IMC and Graves in pursuit of the militia's first fleet. After being on the run for months, the militia's first fleet is running low on fuel and supplies and has no choice but to conduct a desperate raid on an IMC gas mining facility. The militia's Marauder Corps suffers great casualties, but the raid is considered a success. After the raid, the militia's first fleet retreats back to space with only a few weeks worth of fuel. The IMC continues to track the remains of the militia's fleet, but while tracking, they actually stumble across McAllen's crash site on the planet of Troy. In their bloodlust, the IMC decides this would be the perfect opportunity to test out their new Spectre combat drones in an attempt to massacre the entire town that McAllen has built with the colonists. McAllen sends out an SOS signal, which the militia fleet intercepts and sends the Marauder Corps to investigate what's going on. The militia makes contact with McAllen, who offers them the intel for how to destroy the IMC's critical refueling depot on the planet of Demeter in exchange for evacuating his colony from the planet. The militia agrees and then begins making plans to attack and destroy the base on Demeter. Jump forward a bit because, you know, there's not a whole lot of story in Titanfall 1 with there not even being a traditional campaign at all, but anyway, the militia destroys some repulsor towers that were keeping the hostile wildlife away from the airbase that was meant to defend the IMC refueling depot. With the air defense essentially knocked out, the militia were able to get more forces on the ground to attempt to overheat the reactor core that ran the entire facility.
Pilots, defend the hard points at all costs. If the militia overload the reactor core, it's all over. Strap in.
Unfortunately, the reactor core was too resilient and required a manual detonation, so McAllen did the heroic thing by sacrificing his own life to detonate the core, which resulted in the total destruction of the refueling depot.
It's been an honor serving with you.
And with no way to refuel, a significant amount of the IMC fleet were stranded in the frontier with no way to get back home to the core worlds. Graves and the vast majority of humans that made up the IMC fleet now were stuck in the frontier, and they defected to join the frontier militia. With Graves gone, an AI named Spyglass was promoted to the rank of Vice Admiral for anyone that didn't defect away from the IMC. This small fleet of mostly stranded IMC robotic infantry, led by Spyglass, would then be known as the Remnant Fleet. With this major victory for the militia, it would be the turning point for the Frontier War, although the IMC still controlled the majority of the frontier. Let's time hop forward 5 years this time, and we arrive at the start of Titanfall 2. Before we get too deep, I think we need to talk about pilots a little bit. Okay, so think of pilots as the Spartans from Halo, but in the Titanfall universe. They're some of the most highly trained super soldiers out there. They utilize expensive jump kits, which enable them to perform maneuvers like wall running and double jumping, but if we're being honest, they're basically just the ultimate parkour jetpack simulator. Jump kits have an interesting history of their own as well. They were originally designed for workers on salvage and construction projects, allowing them to move more easily within the 3D structures they were working on. Pilots also carry a special knife with them called the data knife. Not only can you use these things to execute the baddies, but they're also used to hack vulnerable ports on Spectres, heavy turrets, and consoles. Unlike in Titanfall 1, there's an actual playable campaign in Titanfall 2 where you play as the militia rifleman Jack Cooper as you're forced into becoming a pilot of the Titan BT-7274, which, we call BT. In the first mission, you find yourself aboard the starship the MCS James McAllen, approaching the planet Typhon within enemy IMC territory. You get trained up by the captain of the ship and run through the pilot's gauntlet. After passing the gauntlet, you move on to the big boys, the Titans. You get introduced to BT, the captain's personal Vanguard-class Titan, and then as you start calling in your own, the simulation gets disrupted as the ship arrives at Typhon. In Mission 2, you get thrust into a fight to secure a landing zone and regroup with your unit. You storm the beachhead fighting against a bunch of robotic specters. And then out of nowhere, an enemy Titan ambushes you, but have no fear, BT is here. The captain pulls you into cover and injects you with a sedative, but at the same time, BT gets attacked by several members of the Apex Predators. And no, these aren't the sweat lords you play against in ranked Apex Legends. These are the members of a mercenary group commanded by a guy named Cuban Blisk. And since Blisk and the Apex Predators are vital for the ongoing story of Titanfall and later Apex Legends, we're going to eject from the story for a second here and explain the story behind the Apex Predators mercenary group. This elite mercenary unit of pilots is led by Cuban Blisk. They fight for whoever the highest bidder is, regardless of any moral ethics. Their Titan insignia might look a little bit familiar, and that's for good reason. There are 6 total known members of the Apex Predators over time, and this includes Blisk, Sloan, Richter, Viper, Kane, and Ash. We'll get to what exactly happens to the full team within the Titanfall 2 story, but a few of these characters have serious impacts on Apex Legends. Blisk is essentially the person that starts the Apex games, Viper is the father of Valkyrie, and Ash is speculated to have been the assistant doctor that traveled around with Horizon in the search of the element Ranthium. Ash becomes a simulacrum, is presumed dead during the Titanfall 2 storyline, but is reconstructed by Vincent Dynamics. Something then happens to Ash again before the start of Apex Legends, and then Hammond Robotics hires Loba to find 9 pieces of Ash's head scattered across Kings Canyon. Ash gets reassembled and then thrown into a garbage can for whatever reason, but she is then discovered by her favorite robot, Pathfinder. Pathfinder considers Ash to be his girlfriend and invites Rampart and Mirage over to meet Ash. Rampart triggers some of Ash's memories that have been erased, similar to how Revenant had his memories removed over time, and right after that, Blisk secretly contacts Ash and clears up a misunderstanding that he tried to kill Ash. Ash leaves Pathfinder's home with Blisk and is later seen running the underground deathmatch arenas connected to the Apex games. Alright, that's enough of a detour for now. Let's snap back to where we were in Titanfall 2. So, BT does his absolute best to fend off the attack from Blisk, but Ash is able to forcibly remove 2 of BT's batteries, which leaves him unable to fight. You drift in and out of consciousness at this point as Richter goes around chopping off ears for his war trophy collection, and Blisk mentions something called the Ark, and then you black out. You wake up to a prowler trying to chomp on you, but BT has your back again and blasts it with his chain gun. You find the badly wounded captain who tells you to take BT, his jump jet, and armor before he dies.
Transfer authorization to new pilot. Link. Bravo Tango 7274. Trooper, take my Titan. Use my helmet in my jump kit. This is the real thing. Take care of him.
You bury the captain and then go on the search with BT to find replacement batteries. You find the batteries and then do some Titanfall stuff before escaping the crash site. Mission 3, you attempt to go rendezvous with Major Anderson, but on the way you help out some other militia pilots fight against some IMC Titans. You exit BT and make your way into a sewer control room to empty out some acidic fluid. You come across some other militia trapped in the facility fighting against the IMC's newest weapon, Stalkers. You press on and hear some taunting conversations from the Apex Predator, Kane. You fight some more IMC troops, they try to drop ship in some explosive ticks on you, but you manage to get out of there and reunite with BT just in time to fight Kane. He calls you a scrub a few hundred times, but you shut him up by, well, you kill him, and then you steal his helmet so you can listen in on the IMC communications and overhear Blisk talking with Sloan about the Ark and the Draconis.
Sloan, this is Blisk. The IMC have almost sealed the Ark. It's time to prepare the Draconis.
Copy. Got myself 3 captured militia. What should I do with them?
Just kill them.
I'm on my way. Slow now.
Man, what is going on around here? You press onwards in the 4th mission through a cave system and find yourself inside the World Foundry. As you try to activate an elevator, BT gets caught by Ash in a loading arm and is unable to free himself. You've got to go save your mechanical friend, so you delve further into the facility while being taunted the whole time by Ash. You fight through some bad boys and arrive at a simulacrum dome, where an artificial arena gets constructed by Ash around you. Spectres and Reapers are deployed for testing purposes, which you defeat with relative ease, so Ash sends in some IMC soldiers as if they're gonna do any better. This gives you a chance to escape, and Blisk gets a bit peeved that Ash put her arena games before her work, warning Ash not to ever mess up again. So Ash decides what better way to not mess up than to just self-destruct the whole facility to kill you, BT, and, well, anyone else that can't evacuate in time. An explosion from the self-destruct sequence frees BT, you meet up with him again, do some more Titanfall stuff, and then give Ash a nice little squish. You escape the test facility, and then into Mission 5 we go. You find yourself at the arranged coordinates where you're supposed to meet up with Major Anderson, but instead you just find an abandoned and destroyed Ares Division research facility. What? Okay, well, hold on. Ares Division, what's that? Well, the Archaeological Research Division, nicknamed Ares, is an IMC research and development, well, division that is responsible for uncovering, researching, and exploiting alien technologies across the frontier. They essentially have free reign to do whatever they want by any means necessary to advance IMC technology. We'll learn more about what they're doing on Typhon and how they experimented on Wraith in a little bit, but let's jump back to our timeline. You and BT decide to split up at the Ares facility to cover ground faster, and you start noticing strange time rift anomalies, and eventually you stumble across Major Anderson's body somehow fused into the ceiling. You snag his helmet, which apparently means you become the acting commander officer of all the militia forces on Typhon, and then you are shown a holographic recording of Anderson's briefing before his death.
This wrist-mounted device we recovered during Operation Grizzly should protect you. We know the IMC have contracted Kuban Blisk and his mercenaries to protect something critical there.
You learn that he received some kind of a gauntlet that allowed him to phase shift through time. You head back into the facility and secure the gauntlet, and then phase shift your way through the past and present as you gain intel and fight through the IMC infantry and prowlers. Through some holographic recordings by Anderson, you learn more about the Ark and how the IMC plans to use it with their prototype fold weapon to destroy the planet Harmony.
One of our own planets is next. They're going to hit Harmony, and they've moved up the timeline. I have to get this intel to Sarah.
In order to stop you from learning more about the IMC's intentions, they execute the test of the prototype fold weapon just as you approach the Ark's power source at the center. It results in some kind of a weird time freezing event that, for whatever reason, doesn't kill you, but you are able to fully scan the Ark. You're transported then back to your normal timeline, but look down to realize your time gauntlet is completely fried. RIP phase shifting. Well, at least until we meet Wraith during the Apex games. Connection? You bet. In the next mission, you realize your best course of action is to find friendly forces and send out a distress message back to the militia fleet to let them know that the IMC plans to destroy Harmony with the fold weapon. So, you travel for several hours until you arrive at a battle-scarred IMC interstellar beacon. You help out some militia forces that are under attack from stalkers, and they tell you that there's no way to send a message with the interstellar beacon unless you're able to find an Arc tool to power and repair the station. Of course, the only place anyone thinks you might find an Arc tool is deeper underground, somewhere in the power grid, so you go it alone, slap some robots, and find the Arc tool in the hands of a MRVN. You then use it to restart the reactor powering the facility and get out of there fast before you die from radiation poisoning. Power is successfully restored, but before the satellite dish fully activates, it fails to fully deploy due to a damaged uplink module. You head off with BT to try to fix the satellite dish, and BT notices that there's actually another beacon undergoing construction in the distance. BT gives you a nice toss so you can reach the beacon to search for a new uplink module, and then you get, of course, attacked once again by the IMC and another Apex predator named Richter. You shoot, parkour, and arc tool your way to victory until you get the replacement uplink module from the satellite, and then you head back to rendezvous with BT. BT throws you to the top of the dish and you replace the busted uplink module. The dish automatically starts moving and you slide off towards a chasm of poisonous death fog. Of course, you've got some nice plot armor in the form of BT as he catches you, and you head off towards the control room to try to use the beacon. You get intercepted by IMC forces and the Apex Predator Richter again, but you've gotten pretty good at killing these ultimate mercenary noobs by now, so you deal with him just like the others. You send off the message about the fold weapon to the militia and then prepare for your next mission, an all-out assault on the Ark. Oh, and BT likes you as his pilot.
Your data recorder says your original pilot was KIA.
Correct. Captain Ty Lastimosa was killed in action. I am now linked to an acting pilot, Rifleman Jack Cooper.
Wait a minute. Lastimosa linked you to a rifleman?
Yes, he had no other options.
Understood. We'll get you transferred to a fully qualified pilot.
Objection. Cooper is my pilot. Our combat effectiveness rating now exceeds 90%. Request permission to retain this link.
You're lucky our backs are up against the wall, BT. Permission granted.
Next, you find yourself in a first-person Titanfall as you land outside an IMC airfield with the Ark about to be loaded onto its transport ship, the IMS Draconis. You fight your way through dozens of IMC forces, including several fights with multiple Titans and Reapers until you find a railgun suspended by chains in a building. You fight your way through some more heavy IMC Titan forces and eventually make it to the Draconis. When it feels like you're within spitting distance, the Draconis takes off with not only the Ark, but also the Apex Predator Sloan. You then jump into a militia dropship with BT in hot pursuit, escorted by a militia carrier-class starship, the 6-4, which are basically the militia's version of the Apex Predators, and the Blackbird Squadron. You're almost immediately ambushed by Viper, another one of the Apex Predators, and are knocked and even thrown from ship to ship until you jump into one of the enemy's battleships. You fight through the ship to gain control of several medium turrets firing upon the militia, but you're just a little too late as the battleship shoots down the militia's starship. You disable the guns anyway because you're a good guy, and then the 6-4 joins you on the ship to help take the bridge. Inside the bridge, you whip out your data knife and deactivate the ship's heavy turrets. BT gets dropped under the bridge, breaks you out, and then, oh crap, Viper's back! You swat him out of the sky because the game is literally programmed in your favor, and then BT spits you out and gets ready to fastball you ahead to the transport ship holding the Ark. But holy shit, it's Viper again? I thought this guy was dead. He crashes into BT, pulling you both up into the sky while punching BT until you somewhat luckily fall down to the hull of the transport ship. BT and Viper both come crashing down soon after, and a fight breaks out. Viper rips off one of BT's arms, and then BT rips off Viper's cockpit hatch. In a scene out of a movie, you blast Viper as he's exposed within his Titan, adding one more Apex Predator kill to your list. BT then helps you breach the hull of the ship, and you both waltz your way through some enemies to the ship's containment unit, which looks like a big egg. BT punches a hole in it, and you reach in to grab the Ark. You toss the Ark into BT, but the ship has lost so much altitude at this point that there's no way you're going to make it out of the ship before it crashes, so BT uses himself to shield you from the impact.
What are you doing?
Protocol 3.
Get the Ark out of here!
Negative. We are trapped. I will not lose another pilot. Brace for impact.
In the final mission, you wake up being interrogated by none other than Blisk himself. BT has suffered severe damage from the crash and most of his functions are compromised, but he still has the Ark stored within his chest. Blisk threatens to execute you in an attempt to coerce BT to hand over the Ark, but BT has plans of his own. He sends you an encrypted message to trust him and opens up the cockpit, revealing the Ark. BT then tries to grab Blisk and fires off several missiles, narrowly missing Blisk and Sloan, but killing all the other IMC troops in the room. Sloan returns with her Titan and, well...
Nice try, love. Say goodnight.
Alright, get the Ark out of here! We're running out of time!
You black out for a bit and struggle your way over to BT to retrieve his Seer kit. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape kits are, well, a bundle of a smart pistol, a data knife, and the AI core of the Titan, used by the militia as a last-ditch effort against enemy forces after a pilot's Titan has been rendered inoperable. You aimbot your way through the ship until you get to a point where Commander Brace can drop a Titan down for you to install BT's AI core into. And just like that, you're back in business. You fight your way through more IMC resistance as you storm the Fold Weapons Injection Facility. As you arrive, you overhear General Martyr of the IMC tell Blisk that he has his money and that he can leave. Sloan stays behind, and if it wasn't obvious to them by now, you prove once again that you're an absolute Apex Predator killing machine. And with Sloan dead, you attempt to disengage the Ark from being used by the Fold Weapon, but in your attempt, BT gets put into a temporary state of paralysis, which gives Blisk the perfect moment to have a monologue.
It's your lucky day, hero. I'm not going to kill you. I don't work for free. But you don't get to kill me either. Yeah, you earned this, eh?
Blisk, that Vanguard-class Titan is still in there.
Not my problem, Marta. Should have put it in my contract. I've got other people with money to see.
What are you doing? What do you think you are doing?
After Blisk departs, BT loads you both up into the injector and launches you towards the Ark. And for the absolute last time, BT invokes Protocol 3, protect the pilot.
Protocol 3, protect the pilot.
BT, what are you doing?
Trust me.
BT!
After BT detonates his core, you parkour your way out of there, get rescued by Commander Briggs, and look back on the planet as the fold weapon backfires, shattering Typhon to its core. You set a course for the planet of Harmony, and your character, Jack Cooper, ends the story with this.
The destruction of Typhon saved the planet Harmony. The militia calls this planet their headquarters, but millions of others call it home. Commander Briggs says I'll be inducted into the Marauder Corps and assigned a new Titan. After the techs wipe what's left of my neural link with BT. I don't know what that'll feel like, to get assigned a new Titan. I kinda like the old one.
Great job on Titanfall, to all of you.
This is Pilot Jack Cooper, signing off.
But whoa, wait, hold on. That was touching and all, and we all miss BT, but what about Apex Legends? Well, after the events of Titanfall 2, the Frontier War still wasn't quite over yet. There was a communications blackout in the year 2715, which left the IMC forces in the Frontier fractured and lost against the growing dominance of the militia forces. There was one final battle on the planet of Gridiron, of which there were no survivors, at least according to one of the IMC military soldiers nicknamed Bangalore. In the months following the battle at Gridiron, the starship that Bangalore was assigned to with her brother Jackson was attacked by unknown forces. Jackson sacrificed his own life to save Bangalore as he shielded her when a bomb blew out a large chunk of the ship's outer hull, sucking him into space. Bangalore would later be seen fighting in the Apex Games, looking to raise money in the hopes of finding a pilot that would be willing to take the decades-long trip back to the core worlds, where she could finally reunite with what remained of her family. But how did the Apex Games start in the first place? Well, remember Blisk from Titanfall 2? Yeah, he essentially started the Apex Games by himself. Let me explain. 18 years after we last saw Blisk at the end of Titanfall 2 in the Battle of Typhon, he found his way out beyond the frontier to the fringes of known space in a region called the Outlands. There are less than 10 known planets that make up the Outlands, with each of them being relatively untouched during the events of the Frontier War. The planets had only just begun getting settled when Blisk arrived, and he saw an opportunity to not only make a profit, but also a way to replenish his Apex Predators mercenary team. On the planet of Solus, with the help of the mercenary syndicate, Blisk founded the first of the Apex Games around the year 2729 on an island arena that would be known as the King's Canyon. The Apex Games were actually an evolution of an earlier version where IMC soldiers would fight in an arena kind of thing called Thunderdome. The planet of Solus is actually home to several of the legends, including Wattson, Mirage, Revenant, and Gibraltar. And even in some of Gibraltar's voice lines before Season 5, he could be heard reminiscing about the Thunderdome days.
Oh, fuck yeah, brother. I'm hard as a rock.
Wait, no, the other clip.
Got a lot of memories of Skull Town and Thunderdome. Did a lot of growing up here. Man, this one hurts, brothers. Don't think I'll ever get used to not seeing Thunderdome.
But each and every legend has a different reason for attending the Apex Games, which we'll get to in a second here. It's said that the arena at King's Canyon was used for 124 seasons until an attack on the island's repulsor tower by Crypto in Season 2 allowed the entry of hostile wildlife, which resulted in significant damage and devastated the arena. The match that was in progress was halted, and all the legends were evacuated. The Syndicate suspended the games on King's Canyon after the attack and proceeded to make various modifications to the arena in order to increase viewership and contain the wildlife that had invaded the island. In the meantime, there was a decision to relocate the Apex games to World's Edge, a new arena on the planet Talos in Season 3. Soon after the relocation of the games, a sponsorship was struck up with Hammond Robotics in Season 4, which coincided with the entry of a new legend called Forge and the Planetary Harvester. However, before Forge could join the games, he was assassinated by Revenant.
Don't worry.
As Hammond Robotics learned that Revenant was basically going on a killing spree of anyone connected to Hammond Robotics, both the Prime Director of Public Relations for the Apex games and the head of the legal department of Hammond Robotics found a way to contain Revenant by allowing him to join the games. And after some time, the games eventually returned to Kings Canyon, but an underground explosion triggered by Loba destroyed a significant part of the island, including Skulltown and Thunderdome. Bangalore quickly apprehended Loba, but the head of the Apex games instead wanted Loba to join the games and use her skills to find and assemble the 9 fragments of Ash's head. In exchange for the fragments, Loba then received Revenant's source code, of which he wanted her to use to finally kill him, but instead, she sent it through a phase runner back to the planet Gridiron as a way to take away the one thing that Revenant wanted, and that was his death. This was Loba's revenge for when Revenant killed Loba's parents when she was a kid. Hammond Robotics then reconstructed Ash, extracted some code from her memory banks, and tossed her in a dumpster when they were done. Pathfinder then found Ash, took her to a warehouse, and woke her up. A visit from Rampart accidentally triggers some of Ash's memories, which alerts Blisk to her whereabouts. And he meets up with her, and they travel off to start setting up the arena's death matches. The games then expand to Olympus on the planet of Samathi. Olympus was a colony for some of the brightest minds in the Outlands during the mid-2600s. But an accident in an experimental facility created a phase rift which sent all the people fleeing. The city's computer system kept it running despite the anomaly, which quickly drew the interest of the Outlands rich and famous. It spent 40 years as a colony for the wealthy until the rift grew unstable and the city was abandoned for good. Well, at least until the Syndicate turned it into another arena for the Apex games. Hammond Robotics then, of course, followed closely behind, per the usual, and set up a laboratory in the area to investigate the rift. In their free time between the games, Lifeline, Gibraltar, and Octane try to boot up a century-old Marvin to cheer up Pathfinder after he's lost Ash. They need a special battery that Lifeline's father has, so they all go to attend a charity event where her father would be. A group of mercenaries, actually hired by Octane's father, interrupts the event as they are trying to gain control of the planet from the Syndicate, but that gets resolved with the help of the Legends. They use the battery to restore the Marvin's functionality, which provides enough clues for Pathfinder to find out about the backstories of the Legends and how his creation is tied to the Outland energy crisis and the project that stopped it. He was created by the Project Iris scientists in the year 2658 to refine an element called branthium, but on the day they managed to refine their first batch, the group was betrayed from within and the scientists had to trigger the phase runner to self-destruct to protect from the unknown party from stealing the branthium. This led to the death of Pathfinder's creators, the presence of branthium throughout the Outlands, and Pathfinder's loss of memory. The games then transitioned a bit as the Syndicate negotiated with the new warlord of Selvo. Selvo entered their representative Fuse into the Apex games, but during his grand entrance, his ship was hacked by his old friend Maggie, causing it to fire on the crowd and destroy parts of Kings Canyon. Maggie then hijacked control of the games, causing ring flares and other numerous quirks to occur within the matches. Upset by this, Fuse finally confronted Maggie and reaffirmed his decision to her that he wanted to stay in the Apex games. The two then got into a fight which resulted in the death of Maggie. Meanwhile, over on Olympus, a mysterious fleet of ships docked within the arena, starting with the Icarus. The ships brought with them some massive Medusa vines that broke through the ship hulls and overtook the city, destroying power grids, water mains, and even buildings overnight. The Legends begin to inspect the Icarus and all of the vines, and Loba gets knocked off the ship from one, but she's then caught by Valkyrie. Valkyrie introduces herself and explains that if you get too close to the vines that you can have a fatal reaction that starts with bleeding eyes and kills within 72 hours. Of course, it's then revealed that Bangalore has bloody eyes, which sends the Legends into a search to find the antigen to save Bangalore. Caustic explains that the antigen can be extracted from mammoth-sized Carthage spiders. And with the help of Bloodhound, the Legends find the spiders, capture a few, and use them to cure Bangalore and stop the growth of the vines across Olympus. Alright, so as promised, I said we'd get back to the character-specific lore, and it's that time now. And since we've already covered pretty much all of the lore for Revenant, Loba, Bangalore, Pathfinder, Blisk, and even Ash earlier on, we're just going to keep moving on with the legends we haven't talked about as much yet. Bloodhound is known across the Outlands as one of the greatest game hunters the Frontier has ever seen. Bloodhound was taken in by their uncle Artur at a young age because of the unfortunate death of their parents. Artur taught Bloodhound the old ways, which was basically the way of nature instead of the way of technology. But Bloodhound kinda liked technology despite the disapproval from Artur, and ultimately merged the old ways with technology to take down a Goliath that had been preying on their village. Bloodhound calls on Earth's old Norse gods to guide them and believes that destiny is a path that has already been laid out, eventually carrying all to their death. You know, like their uncle Artur, but with that knowledge comes strength, because until death comes, Bloodhound knows that they can't be stopped. Caustic's full name is Alexander Maxwell Knox, and he worked as a research scientist for Humbert Labs on his home world of Gaia. At Humbert Labs, Caustic researched different pesticide gases that were needed to protect the crops of the Frontier. He was one of their brightest scientists and worked day and night developing new gases, but to make sure they worked, he needed to test them on something living. Working in secret, Caustic began to become infatuated with his creations and their ability to destroy anything they touched. At some point, he was confronted by the head of Humbert Labs, which resulted in the lab going up in flames and presumably killed both Caustic and Dr. Humbert. Bodies were found, but were too charred to be recognized. 10 years later, Caustic showed up out of nowhere and joined the Apex games in the search of new test subjects for his gas creations. Crypto's real name is Taejun, and he was raised on the streets as an orphan with his foster sister, Mila. Together, both Taejun and Mila became computer engineers and designed drones used by the Syndicate to broadcast the Apex games throughout the Outlands. At some point, they stumbled upon an algorithm that could predict the result of any Apex games match, hidden within the computer systems. This caught the attention of some shady people, and Mila went missing. Taejun was framed as a murderer and had to go into hiding. Some time passed and he wanted to find out who had framed him, so he hacked into the game's mainframe, blew up the repulsor on King's Canyon, and entered his alias, Crypto, into the game's record of legends. Fuse grew up on Salvo, a brutal planet ruled by a rotating collection of misfit warlords bent on mayhem, murder, and good times. For most of his life, he worked as a mercenary alongside his childhood friend Maggie, but while she aspired to become a powerful warlord, Fuse wanted to spar in the arena. Fuse found his calling late in life, fighting in Salvo's blood sport, the Bone Cage. He proved to be not only the best gladiator on the planet Salvo, but also the most charismatic. With the only greater challenge being the Apex games, Fuse felt the urge to join. Fuse told Maggie that he was going to be the first person from Salvo to join the Apex games, and this upset Maggie so much that she pulled the pin on the grenade they shared throughout their relationship and hurled it over to Fuse. The result? A broken friendship in Fuse's right arm. Since Gibraltar is the son of 2 Search and Rescue Association of Solace volunteers, he has always been skilled at getting others out of dangerous situations that are common in the Outlands. However, he only began to understand the value of protecting others when he and his boyfriend Nick stole his father's motorcycle, took it on a joyride, and got trapped by a deadly mudslide. Gibby's parents saved them, but his father lost an arm in the process. Gibraltar never forgot that sacrifice and devoted his life to helping those in need. Many of Gibraltar's friends and colleagues competed in the Apex games for money, fame, and glory over the years, but some never came home. Gibraltar joined to keep them safe, and he's now become an icon in the Apex games, putting himself in the line of fire to protect his squad and send his opponents running for cover. Horizon is an astrophysicist, and her real name is Dr. Mary Summers. In the 2640s, research on Olympus discovered that energy resources in the Outlands would be depleted within 20 years. In search of an energy source, Horizon went on a dangerous mission to a black hole in the hopes of finding a powerful energy source called Branthium. She deployed a shuttle to attempt to extract the material, but her assistant, Dr. Ashley Reed, of who was theorized to actually be Ash when she was still a human, cut the connection between the shuttle and the main ship and ran off with the Branthium, leaving Horizon stranded. She managed to use the extracted Branthium to jump back to Olympus, but due to time dilation near the black hole, 87 years had passed, and presumably so had her son. Horizon then joins the Apex games to fund her research of finding a way to go back in time to be with her son. Lifeline's real name is AJ Shea, and she's actually the child of wealthy war profiteers. She left home when she learned of the damage her family had caused and enlisted in the Frontier Corps, which is a humanitarian organization providing aid to the frontier communities in need. Her mission in life is simply to help others, so she joins the Apex games to further fund the Frontier Corps' humanitarian efforts. As Mirage is the youngest of 4 brothers, he perfected the art of fooling around to get attention at a young age. The only thing he ever took seriously was holopilot technology, of which he was introduced to by his engineering-minded mother. Mirage's brothers went missing during the Frontier War, but he kept working with his mother to further develop hologram technology, which brought them closer together. While working as a bartender in Solace City to make some extra money, Mirage overheard amazing stories about the Apex games and the wealth and glory that came with victory. Of course, that all sounded great to Mirage, but he felt like he couldn't join the games and leave his mother without any children. She gave him a set of customized hologram devices and told Mirage to go after his dreams. Mirage soon became the life of the Apex games, outwitting, outstyling, and out-bamboozling his opponents and charming the audiences. Octavio Silva, aka Octane, is the son of his preoccupied parents that owned Silva Pharmaceuticals. Since they're never around, Octane often gets bored, so he entertains himself by performing death-defying stunts and posting holo-vids of them for his fans online. One day, he decides to set the course record for a nearby pilot gauntlet by launching himself across the finish line by using a grenade. He succeeded in achieving the record, but it costed him his legs. Still, it was the best day of his life. Doctors told him that his Daredevil stunt days were over, which he didn't like, so he talked with and guilted Lifeline into forging an order to replace his legs with bionic ones. With his new robo legs, Octane decided that stunt running wasn't enough of an adrenaline rush anymore, so he joined the Apex games. Rampart is a mod shop business owner who just needs a big gun and a backpack full of scrap to make her happy. But before she opened her modding shop on Gaia, she actually made a name for herself in the underground pilot gauntlet circuit. Rampart climbed to the top with her skill and use of custom modded gear. She began taking jobs from smugglers, syndicate members, and everyone in between. Some even began saying it wasn't great unless it had Rampart written on it. One night, she got ambushed by a group of assailants at her shop. Her business burned down and she was left with nothing more than a card to compete in the Apex games. Before his birth, it was foretold that Seer would bring pain and suffering to the world, and on the night he was born, a meteor barreled across the sky and struck his world's moon. It was considered a bad omen, and when his pale blue eyes opened for the first time, the people really thought that he was truly cursed. Luckily for Seer, his parents still loved him because they saw his true, empathic, creative soul. They even supported him when he was drawn to the theatricality of the arenas where he could fully express himself. At first, the crowds were unsure of him, but with time, the power within Seer grew, and with it, his strength in the arena. The people in the crowd who were forgotten outcasts like Seer began to see themselves in him, and with each fight, more and more came to cheer Seer on as their champion. Seer then joined the Apex games as an icon of the shunned, the unaccepted, and the forgotten. When Valkyrie was a child, she stole her dad, the Viper's Titan. She wanted to be just like him when she grew up, but the next day he left on a mission and never returned. Spoiler alert, we kinda killed him back in Titanfall 2. Anyways, she still tried to follow in his footsteps. During the day, she smuggled precious cargo, and at night went shot for shot with outlaws and mercenaries at the bars. But even with her ladies, liquor, and love of the sky, she was still obsessed with finding Cuban Blisk, the man that recruited her dad to the Apex Legends. After tracking Blisk down and she was about to kill him, Blisk surprised Valkyrie as he spoke highly of her father with respect. She shot the glass out of his hand anyway to send a message and then swiped the Apex Games card from him. Using the intact flight core from the Viper's Titan, she built a sleek new jetpack that honored her father's memory that she brought with her to the Apex Games. Wattson's real name is Natalie Paquette, and she is actually a familiar face around the Apex Games as she is the daughter of the game's lead electrical engineer. She studied his manuals and discovered her calling at a young age. Though she could be completely distracted one moment and hyper-focused the next, electricity grounded her. Its ordered, predictable flow made sense in the way the rest of the world just didn't. She became such a skilled engineer that she was commissioned by the Syndicate to build the Apex Games modified containment ring. Sadly, her father died the day it was revealed, and in her lowest moment, a group of competitors invited her to return to the arena, which brought her a sense of home. She now fights in the games alongside her friends in the arena she designed with the help of her father. Subject 61137, codenamed Wraith, woke up in an IMC detention facility for the mentally ill with no memory of her life before. She also began hearing a distant voice whispering in her mind that would keep her awake for days on end, nearly driving her insane. One day, a portal opened in front of her and a person wearing a purple helmet came out. The person got upset with Wraith for not fighting back against the facility staff and then revealed that she was also Wraith, but from a different dimension. With this Voidwalker's help, Wraith learned to trust the voices in her head and was given the device that allowed her to safely manipulate the void, similar to how experiments were conducted by the Ares division on the planet Typhon in the past with the Time Gauntlet. Wraith then escaped the detention facility with one of her portals and arrived at Kings Canyon while it was still under construction for the Apex Games. Wraith would then go on to join the Apex Games on a quest to find the buried truths of her past. There are a few things that don't quite fit into any one of the particular characters' backstory exactly, but another really interesting thing I wanted to cover was how Marvins can actually evolve in their intelligence over time through some kind of uplifting process. This is actually what happened with Pathfinder because he started out as a Marvin that wasn't originally self-aware. That uplifting process can either happen naturally or it can be built into the Marvin. Oh, and because I know someone will mention it down in the comments, we have to quickly cover the weapons in Apex Legends and how they tie back to Titanfall. Well, since Apex Legends takes place around 20 or so years after the events of Titanfall 2, pretty much every gun in Apex is just a newer model of the same guns that were in Titanfall. Oh, and those Nessie plushies you see all over in Apex Legends, yeah, they were also on every single map in Titanfall 1 and Titanfall 2. I do want to mention here that if you haven't checked out my prior video on the entire history of Apex Legends, where I go through more of the multiplayer history season by season, I'd highly recommend that video if you like this one. And if you did like this video, or that one, then do me a solid and hit that subscribe button. These videos obviously take a massive amount of time to pull together, and I know for a fact that I missed a few things along the way, so let me know if there's anything you wish I would have included down in the comments, and also let me know what you'd like to see me cover next. I'm going to keep pumping videos out like this as time goes on, so I hope to see you again in the next one.